Hey friends, you probably recognize the backdrop as our banner in church. I suppose it's one perk with not a lot going on around the building right now is I can use whatever I need as a prop, right? I was thinking a lot about communion. Just because it's weird when you do communion on camera, and for whatever reason it just struck me today thinking about communion in general. So I just want you to do some little basic math for me, or maybe it's big math. We'll see. How many times have you taken communion in your life? I'm sure you don't have a journal entry that every time you do, you have a little check mark so you know. But you figure if we do it monthly here, so once a month, 12 times a year, times however many years, roughly, who knows. Maybe you do it more often. There are some communities, my old church community, we had one of our services where we did communion every single Sunday. It's part of how you do things. And I've had discussions with folk that say, if you do it too much, it's not special anymore. And I've had other folks say, well, that's the point. You don't want it to be special. It's nothing special. It's supposed to be ordinary. Yeah, regardless of what you're thinking about. In my profession, you do communion a lot. I couldn't tell you how many times I've taken communion, let alone presided over the communion table. I can remember the first time I officially presided over communion. That was something I will remember. I remember a time when I was, say, probably 13, and there were these two pastors, John and Chip, at my camp who did communion with us, and it was unlike anything I could ever remember. I can remember some time sharing communion with a couple of our members because it was the last time we did communion together. Bob Hollenbeck is one in particular I will never be able to forget because that man would make me crack up in the middle of doing the communion liturgy because that was Bob. There are all those moments where you think about communion. And from your side, you don't see exactly what I see because you're the ones taking communion. And it's a little bit different when you're leading communion. You preside over the table, right? You got to get the words right. You got to make sure you don't spill. Seen it. You got to make sure you don't drop your bread. You got to make sure you say, in my case, when I stand in front of you, I say the body of Christ. And however many people are there is how many times I say it that morning, right? There are all those practical things. And so sometimes for a professional, shall we say, communion starts to lose a lot of its, I don't know if meaning's the right word, but it loses some of its significance because it becomes like the Lord's Prayer can be, where you just fire it off and you don't even think about it. And the other day, I had an occasion to do communion, not with me presiding, which was an unusual piece. That does not happen often, but with some of my closest friends. I have a clergy group that meet together, and the folks in that group not only are just some of the best people I know, they are lifelines and supports, and on top of that, they're just wonderful human beings through and through. And we had had a long meeting, the first time we had gathered in person together in far too long, when we're used to meeting, some of us weekly, but as a group, once a month. And it's been 3 months, I think, since we met in person, because Zoom, not the same thing. And we were about to finish up for the night, and one of the people in our group, because we had had dinner together, said, can we do communion? And I was, the first thing in my head, just want to go home. It's late. It's past my bedtime. But thankfully, I kept my mouth shut. I've been trying to do that more often lately. And we sat down, and of the four clergy that were gathered around the table, our elder, the one who cares for us most, broke the bread and shared the cup with us. And it was one of those moments where that experience of communion, it reminded me again of why it's so important to me and why it's so delightfully ordinary. Being able to break bread, being able to share the cup, whether it be a loaf of beautiful bread or not, if it's a beautiful glass of wine or not, whatever it is, it's not the elements that are the most important. It's the act of remembering. It is in that broken bread and that poured cup that we remember, that we recommit and call ourselves back to be the body of Christ as we are created to be. I hope that we can do communion together again soon. I know it may not be as soon as most of us would like, and it will not be the normal kind of communion even when we do gather for a bit while still, until we can get this pandemic under control. But the beauty of that ordinary meal that was made extraordinary is that you can enact this at your dining room table today. You can break the bread. You can share the drinks. You can celebrate the meal and the body of Christ with those around you, whether it be with 1 or 5. It doesn't matter. It's the act of remembering. So the next time you take a bite of bread, the next time you pour something in celebration, whatever it may be, remember that you are loved and you are not alone, and that you, like I, are all part of the body of Christ. Be well. See you soon.